Today, beautiful teachers, we're joined by Christina Whitlock, and we're going to be chatting about things that seem like common sense, but bear thinking about. Christina Whitlock fancies herself a friend and philosopher to the piano teaching profession, and I think she achieves that admirably. Connecting primarily with audience through the Beyond Measure podcast, she enjoys supporting the piano teaching community in many, many wonderful ways. Check out ChristinaWhitlock.com for more details about her and her varied offerings that she has for teachers. One fun fact about Christina I find especially fun. So it turns out, I didn't know this, but she was really close to changing her major in college to social work. The reason that's extra interesting to me is that's what my mom studied, so it's very relevant to my life. But at the last minute, she changed back to music because she realized music wasn't the problem, the root of the problem that she was dealing with in her life. And we're so glad she didn't end up in social work, although I'm sure she would have been great at that too. Please welcome to the show, Christina Whitlock. Okay, so welcome, Christina. There is so much we could have talked about, so I'm just going to set up where I went with our little theme here today. Because when I was thinking about you and all the wonderful things that you teach people about, I kept coming back to the various conversations that we've had where, like through Instagram messages or whatever, where basically we've had the same brain. Either I say something first, like in my podcast or YouTube or whatever, and then you're like, hey, my podcast next week is going to be about just the same thing, or vice versa. So I was thinking about a time that happened recently. I was putting together a new presentation I'm working on called Uncommon Sense for music teachers. Mm-hmm. And I took a break from doing that work and I went to go do my grocery shopping. And on the way I listened to your podcast and it was literally that, just with a different title. So for reference, people can listen after this to 162, which was stating the obvious, which is kind of exactly what I was saying as well, stating the obvious. I loved the stories in that episode. It was so fun. So it was very much in the same vein. And I think it's a lot of what you do really, really well. I think it's one of your superpowers is finding the thing under the thing. Right? Like, what is the underlying thing that's going on here?
I was just going to say that. I think I said early on in my podcast journey, the thing you think is the thing is not always the thing, right?
Yeah.
And my husband always scratches his head at that one, but I'm like, no, the thing you think is the thing is not always the thing. So there you go. You said it much better than I do.
No, I like the way you say it. I think that's fantastic. The thing you think is the thing is not always a thing. It could also be a tongue twister. We could build that into our studios as like a vocal warm-up. Oh, I'm already sidetracked. So I'm going to get back to it.
I'm on board with that. Oh, there you go. There you go.
But the thing you think is the thing is not always the thing. And you're good at finding the thing that's underneath the thing, right? So
I try.
I've picked out a few of your statements that I think hit that note for me. And the first one is the teacher is the method. Could you say a little bit about what you mean by the teacher is the method?
Sure. And of course, I don't get to take credit for this. This is very much stemming from Frances Clark, and she's kind of the one that at least I always consider coining the phrase that the teacher is the method. But it is something that the more work I do in teacher world, the more I realize how much we need to take the reins on our instruction. And, somewhere along the line, it became we started to equate learning to play the piano with moving through books of different colors. And we think if we're in book 4, then we are learning to play the piano. Of course, you're learning things about playing the piano, but it still doesn't mean that your student is really internalizing everything they're seeing. I think that there's such a difference in learning to play repertoire and play the instrument. And that's a distinction that I try really hard to make because I love the repertoire. Like, if you know me, I am all about the wealth of music we have for our instrument. It's my favorite thing about it. And at the same time, like, that is not the instrument, right? So we do have to look out for ways to make sure that we are teaching the person in front of us. And it doesn't always boil down to something as simple as, okay, I did this concept for 3 pages and now I'm doing the next concept for 3 pages. It's just not that straightforward. So,
yeah, and we want to be the one in the driver's seat, right? We want to be the one deciding not always what concept comes next. Like, our method books can help us with that. But it reminds me of when I've attended training and things at our local exam board here in Ireland, sometimes one particular teacher there will, on the stage, say, listen, our syllabus is not a curriculum. And it's the same kind of
Oh.
vibe of, because it
Mhm.
is treated that way quite a lot by teachers, as if like, those
Sure.
are all the scales you need to learn when you're in your fourth year of piano. But they're not. They're just supposed to be testing a little portion of all scales. And you're supposed to be the driving
Exactly.
force behind that.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned like being in the driver's seat because that's kind of the foundation for this resource that I have created for teachers called Making the Most of Your Chosen Method. And that's the analogy that I use is that, yes, your method can be the vehicle, but you are the driver. And the truth of the matter is, and this is something that the more I started to flesh this out in my own head, like changed everything for me. But, our books are not designed to be a catch all for everyone, right? Like I mean, method writers are going to do their best. But at the end of the day, you are supposed to take those as essentially graded repertoire, give you some ideas as to how to introduce concepts and those kinds of things. But the book is not the teacher. Like you are the person who's looking at a person across from you saying, okay, how do I get you to understand how to play this instrument? I work with a lot of young teachers. Used to teach collegiately pedagogy course cycle, and I work with a lot of high school students who are getting their feet wet in piano teaching. I'm always amazed because there'll be things like, oh, well, my student asked me what a sharp was, but that's not until the next book. And so I just told them they weren't ready to hear about it yet. That's the thing that makes me so sad. I'm like, "No, that's a missed opportunity." Any student that sits on your piano bench can understand what a sharp is. They just need, the proper backing for it. They don't have to know everything about the sharp, but you can explain like, "Oh yeah, this is what we call our black keys." Those kinds of questions come up all the time. Of course, we know that teachers are guilty of it with like eighth notes, right? Oh my goodness, my student can't understand eighth notes yet. They're not there in the book. That's a terrible way to look at it. So I just think it's really helpful to remember that you can teach your student anything, and then the book should be supporting you.
Yeah, and it's fine if, because this comes up as well, like, oh, my student can't do that piece, like supplemental piece, whatever, because they
Mhm.
haven't met eighth notes or sharps or something else yet.
Right.
Like, just
Mhm.
briefly explain it. It doesn't even matter if they retain it, and maybe they'll be reminded of it when they come to that point in the method book, and that's
Mhm.
fine. That's okay. They can meet it
Absolutely.
earlier than that.
Yeah, actually, my goal with a student is to always have them experience a concept before it comes up in their book. And so, by and large, I try to make sure by the time we turn the page and there sits the grand staff or something, something big, that they already have exposure to it and they already understand kind of what they're seeing. Because I really believe that we underestimate the power of visual overwhelm that our students go through when we turn to new pages in their books. I think we do not recognize how overstimulating and how confusing and disconcerting that can be. So that's something I try to be really cognizant of. Here we are in our twin brains again, Nicola.
Yes, we've talked about that one before because you talk about experience first or experience before something. You can tell me what
Mhm.
the
Experience before label is what I call it.
experience
But
before
there's
label.
sound before symbol and all the things
Mm,
that all the great minds have said before me. But
yeah,
I choose experience before label. Mhm.
yeah. And when we're talking about seeing things, or like experiencing things before they come up in the method book, I tend to call it preemptive theory, as in like get ahead of the
Ooh,
theory. So it's one
preemptive
another thing
theory.
where we've yeah landed on the same thing. But it's not just us either; it's everyone. Like I always love when I give a presentation or talk about something that a particular pedagogue has said or whoever. Somebody says, "Oh, that's like this." Like, oh, that's like Kadai. Oh, that's like Delcroze. Oh,
Mhm,
that's like Paul Harris's simultaneous learning. That one comes up a lot. I'm like, yeah, that's because
mhm.
everything's like everything because we're all hitting at the same points in different
Right?
ways.
And there is nothing new under the sun in the piano teaching world, right? And I think we do this throughout all kinds of areas of historical thinking, but sometimes we're guilty of feeling like our experiences are so new and so unique to us, or our problems are unique to us, or past
Yeah.
generations didn't understand or they didn't have to deal with this stuff. And while, of course, we have unique challenges in the 21st century, really all of these conflicts have been bubbling up, for centuries. There's so much wisdom to be learned. And anyway, I'm so with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, my next little quote from you that has helped me think so differently is releasing the weight of potential. What are we talking about here, Christina?
This is a big one. And I said this in a session at MTNA in where was the last place we were? Oh, in Reno.
In Reno.
We were sitting in a session I was giving, and I made a comment about how raise your hand if you have met your fullest potential. And, of course, we're all laughing. And Marvin Blickenstaff was sitting in the back of the room. And I was like, well, maybe Marvin maybe Marvin Blickenstaff has met his fullest potential, but I don't even think he agrees. So I do think like we all get caught up in our feelings about our students and how much more they could be doing, or that nasty word of how much they should be doing. And yes, I mean, the truth is our students can always be doing more. And when they decide their lesson journey is over, whether that's from graduation or sooner, yes, it hurts our feelings because they could do so much more. But there is so much more any of us could be doing. And life is a series of choices. We all know in music teacher world, we have to choose our yeses carefully. I hear a lot of teachers who let this get them down. When a student leaves or a student isn't giving their full 100% attention to practice or whatever. And for me, just learning to release that weight that I don't have control over their decisions or how they spend their time or any of those things. And if I can just make our lesson experience the best it can be for whatever chunk of time I see them and for however long that is, then my goal is just to make it a positive experience and to teach them what I can. The day I let go of this obsession over, oh, but this person could do this, oh, it was a good day.
It's so true. And if you believe, as I do, and I'm pretty positive in thinking you do, that pretty much every human on the planet has musical potential, right?
Yes.
It's just about whether
Yes.
they use it or not. No, basically, no one is tone deaf no matter what they claim, or is unmusical
Yes.
or unteachable. So
Mhm.
if everyone has potential, then we have to release that because it's not about what they could do, it's about what they want to do. And as long as
Yes.
they know they could achieve with music, if they wanted
Mhm.
to, I feel like we've done our job. We've given them the tools that they can go as far as they want to with it. Because they also have
Yes.
potential in badminton and maths and whatever else they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. I mean, we all know the students who excel in music study are the ones who tend to excel in lots and lots of things. And that goes down to character traits and, family dynamics and all of those kinds of things. Yes, they could achieve a lot in the world of piano. What they're going to choose to do is very much out of my control. So, what is in my control is how I structure our lessons when they're here. So, I choose to focus on that and cheerlead them on and whatever they're going to do and call it a day.
Absolutely. Okay, let's switch directions to the business
Mhm.
realm and talk about being a good boss to yourself.
Mm.
Because I love this framing of trying to treat ourselves a little bit better, Christina.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's really funny that you're picking up on this because I am the worst. I am the worst offender of these things. Sometimes on the podcast, I talk about things that I need to learn myself. I know this is a pretty universal problem within our profession, but I have this kind of tongue in cheek survey that I give to teachers where it's like, okay, would you work for a boss who I go on all of these things, right? So, like, who always tells you you're never doing enough? And would you work for a person who told you that you didn't know what you were doing and who told you you were worthless and lazy and disorganized? And, would you put up with another person putting all of this on you 24/7? No, or you'd be really miserable. And yet, that's what we do in our own heads, right? Or at least I sure do. I think in most areas of my life, I just have really high standards for what I think I should be able to do. And I say that and I'm laughing because everybody I know is this way. But I think in my own playing, on through my teaching and all of these things, I just feel like my sense of what I know is higher than what I actually do. And so then I just am prone to feel like a constant disappointment. Sometimes I can shake myself out of it and be like, oh, wait, you're really doing a pretty good job here. I go through these times and my husband laughs at me because I'll be like just recently, one day I said, I said, I just have a thriving studio because people just like me. It's not because I'm good at teaching the piano. And he was like, what are you even talking about? He's like, your students play really well. And I'm like, well, yeah, but, and I thought, gosh, why? I mean, I would not work for a person who told me these things. And yet I do work for a person who tells me these things. So I think at least shining a spotlight on it and putting it so clearly is really helpful. So I'm really curious though, because you are a person who gets a lot of things done to a very high standard. So do you struggle with this or are you fully aware of what a boss you are?
Wasn't expecting the end of that sentence. Um, I don't think I'm fully aware of what a boss I am. I think we all just struggle with different things or like question ourselves with different things. I don't
Mhm.
think I'm as type A, if we want to call it that, as many teachers
Mhm.
that I know. As in,
Mhm.
like, I'm better maybe at letting things go when they're not perfect. And I do think that's
Mm.
part of how I get things done. Now, I also have a wonderful team to catch my mistakes when there's glaring things that are not perfect and really need to be better. So I do have that on my side as well when it comes to the content we put out and stuff. But yeah, I think we all question ourselves in different ways. I was really
Mhm.
interested. So you did a kind of book club around what's it called? The Gifts
Oh,
of Imperfection, Brene Brown.
yes. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I was watching from the sidelines and I listened to the book, but I didn't join in on the conversation at the time because I kind of listened after most of it had happened. I caught up afterwards,
That's fine.
just embracing it being imperfect, i.e., late.
That's right.
But that book, I think, is so interesting to listen to,
Mhm.
especially if you're like me and are not really a perfectionist in many areas of life,
Mhm.
because it actually gave me a real insight into the experience of many people who are not like me. There were things I was listening to, I
Oh,
was like, I have never felt that way or considered feeling that way in my entire
really?
life.
See, I just knew. I was like, I think we are wired differently. We think a lot of the same things
Mm.
because we're brilliant. But I do think that's so fascinating. So personally, I reread this book every January. It's The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown, who of course everybody loves. And The Gifts of Imperfection, it's a short little read. It's breezy, except for it's really like to me very convicting content, and it is just about just embracing who you are and not who you have to be, and all of these things. And we did a book club over in my Patreon community on this, and we had the deepest, most beautiful conversations about this book. And so we were all very much like understanding each other, and oh
Mm.
yeah, like I feel that all the time. So to hear another, like, oh, that's how you feel. That's really interesting, and it confirms that I'm like, all right, not like surely the whole world can't feel this way because we'd never get anything done.
Yeah. I could kind of identify like the feelings she was talking about. This is just some parts of the book. I can't even identify the parts now
Mhm.
because it was a while ago. But some parts of it, I could understand what she was getting at. Could definitely feel that in different parts of my life. But the example she was
Mhm.
giving, I was like, I would never feel like that in that circumstance. That kind of thing was coming up for me. So it was really funny.
That's so interesting. I love knowing that. Yeah, there's so many things like for me, like something that always hits me hard is she says something to the effect of like, who has time for painting and writing when there's, the work of productivity to be done. This important work of getting stuff done. Like we can't just time to play and create. And yet we all know like to be thriving human being and have a great life experience, that's actually what we need. So anyway, just interesting stuff. So much to think about in that book.
Yeah, it's really funny that you bring up that sort of quote or that section as well because people often ask me like, "Oh, you get so much done." And again, I have a team, so it's not actually all me. But people call me productive, and yet I do just play and explore and maybe have a little bit of a different upbringing also coming not from North America. I think the hustle thing isn't as strong here, so I think
Hmm.
that's part of it as well. But yeah,
Yeah,
pretty.
it's gotta be. Well, I mean, I follow you on Instagram. I see you going for walks and sewing clothes for fun and all the things. And I'm laughing like behind me here on my shelf is this like watercolor set that I bought like a year and a half ago. And I was like, and it was going to be like at the end of the school year, I was going to take 2 days and just paint. And I still have yet to do it because there's just always more to be done. But the end of the
Mhm.
school year is coming, and maybe this is the year I take a day and paint. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I will confess I probably wouldn't get that done either until Christmas break is when that I would do stuff
Okay.
like that. Like I did a puzzle over Christmas break this year, and that's the only time I would do a puzzle because otherwise I'd be like, I'm just gonna collapse it again and put it in a box. Like that is tough to deal with, but it was
There it
good,
is.
good to do.
So when
Okay,
you're
my
sewing clothes, it's because you're gonna actually wear them, see, and so you'll like, they'll have
yeah,
lasting.
and
Yeah,
it
that
is
makes sense.
partially the like productivity thing as well because for
Mhm.
me it's not relaxing to just sit and relax. I have to do something. And if I do
Yes.
something that has nothing to do with my work anymore, used to be my job, but has nothing to do with my work, that's really important because it
Yeah.
occupies my brain and my hands and lets me relax in that way. So, yeah.
I appreciate that perspective. I've just taken some hefty notes on that in my brain. Because I too, I really struggle with downtime. I really don't like it. And yet I feel like I'm supposed to have more downtime, but maybe I just need to have more productivity creative projects.
Yeah, stuff that's doing
Just
something, but that isn't tied to money at
to
the very
work.
least, and isn't tied
Mhm.
to work. I think changing my perspective on what downtime or relaxing time is has been helpful for
Mhm.
me. Like I used to take no time off, so coming from
Yeah.
somewhere where I've
Me too.
gradually worked up to a 2 day weekend, like very proud of it that I managed to take these 2 days off every week. But yeah, I do have to have something I won't
Mhm.
always do it, but it's there if I want to do things that I won't just dive into my email because I'm feeling like I need to do something.
All right. Gosh, you've really helped tweak something in my brain there. Thank you, Nicola.
Well, you're welcome. Glad to help. And I hope you get back into sewing and we can share sewing tips.
That would
Okay,
be so fun.
I do want to cover one more
Sure.
beautiful thing that you've shared, which is the secret reason that we overschedule ourselves. And this is a classic thing under the thing.
It is the thing under the thing, and you're gonna make me call us all out, aren't you? So, I have a long history of overcommitting to things, and no one listening to this can relate, I know. We are a profession of overcommitters. There are lots of reasons for that. So we have skills that people like and appreciate, and it feels good to be liked and appreciated. But sometimes we agree to too many things because we like that feeling of being needed and being appreciated. And that all boils down to kind of an ego thing. So, for instance, I mentioned I used to teach collegiate classes, and I don't know what the state of things are where you are, but here, at least in the States, there's a real issue in our higher education because universities keep getting rid of tenure track positions and it's all adjuncts. I like to think that I did my adjunct work very well, but I wasn't financially compensated for it to the ability, or to be able to support my ability to do it as well as I wanted to do
Mm.
it. So I knew that that was the piece of my puzzle that needed to go away. But I loved the work and I loved the students and there was so much that I enjoyed about it, but at the end of the day, it was not being financially official. And I was like, why am I holding on to this so tightly? And it was like, oh, well, I like having a university title. I do.
Mm.
And that's not nothing. But at the same time, I'm not willing to drive myself into a pit of burnout just because I want to have a university title. Like calling it what it was really allowed me to say like, "Oh yeah, that's not good enough. That's not worth this to me." And what's really funny about that is anyone who knows anything about academia already knows that I'm just working my brains out for nothing. And so I don't even know that it's that big of a compliment to have that title. So that's just I don't know. It's kind of a can of worms, but it helped me notice. I see this with teachers all the time. I work with teachers one on one as we work through policy changes and those kinds of things. And so many times I'll ask teachers to start with, like, okay, what amount of money do you need to be making to live the life you want to live? And it's like, no one can give me an answer. It takes a long time to get there because we are in this idea where, wow, every single student brings us a pretty significant uptick in income, right? So we think, like, oh, all right, I can just keep taking more and more. And, oh, it's just one more student. It's one more student. But at the end of the day, it doesn't even become about the money. It's really just, oh, like, I'm in demand. Therefore, these people want my attention. I'm going to overschedule myself because they made me feel good about myself. And that's not a good enough reason to me to do anything anymore. So I just really try to check my ego, and I encourage other teachers to do the same. And ego is not a bad thing. More of us, or most of us, could use a little bit more self esteem, a little bit higher value of self worth. But at the same time, I think there is that pleasing nature in a lot of us teachers that are going to compel us to want to overschedule ourselves to be well thought of by others. That's a no for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I often start with that as well, working with various
Mhm.
teachers. Okay, what do you need to be making to live the life you
Yeah.
want to live? And no
Mhm.
teacher ever comes back and says $1 million, right? They know they're
No.
they know they're not going to live some lavish lifestyle. Their needs are
Right.
actually pretty modest usually. They're very
Mhm.
accepting of a simpler house or whatever they have. Not
Yeah.
that they can't have a fancy house. I'm just saying, like, they usually are not demanding so much, but they don't go through that
Mhm.
exercise of, okay, start with the end in mind. Like, where do you need to go?
Mhm.
How many
Mhm.
students is going to get you there at your current fees? What if you increased your fees? You might have fewer students and more free time and make the same
Yeah.
amount. So, yeah, I do think it's really important to find the underlying reason that we're doing something. And I love that you
Mhm.
tell that story about the university thing because it is like, I get how it's, rich for your ego to kind of have this title, but to me, this is a bigger topic, but it speaks to a bigger issue in our society because
Absolutely.
the most important teachers are preschool teachers and
Of
they're
course.
paid the
Yes.
least. They have the biggest impact on
Mhm.
student results and then it goes down from there.
You're
I'm not
exactly
saying
right.
university teachers aren't great. I have
No.
great friends teaching
Mhm.
university,
Mhm.
but the biggest impact you can have is when they're teeny tiny. And yeah,
Yeah.
anyway, that's not a problem we can fix, Christina. I just wanted to put it out there that that
But
should
I
be the
want
esteemed
to,
title.
Nicola. No, you're exactly right. And again, like, to your point, like, I mean, I think all stages of life have opportunity for supreme influence. I know my collegiate professors had a lot of influence on me for all kinds of things. But you're right. I mean, yes, obviously the pay structures for teachers in general, let's just be honest, are completely out of whack.
Yeah,
And yeah, that's an issue. Let me know when you're ready to tackle that.
yeah, we'll get to that next down the road. Oh,
That'll be our
Christina,
next creative productivity project.
it has been such a pleasure to unpack some of these issues, and this is exactly the kind of thing you do in more depth on each one on your podcast. So I hope people go check that out after this as well.
Thank you so much. I will sit down and have a chat with you anytime.